Swallowtail, Chapter 19. Paul sat underneath the edge of the kitchen counter with his back against the cupboards. "We'll hear from the vet any minute, girls," he said, reading their tense faces as he stroked Shadow's back. Anna sat on the other side of Shadow, smoothing her long tail. Paul had moved the bar stools and spread out a blanket. There was dog food, water, and even cookies nearby. But the dog wasn't moving. Only her eyes showed any sign of life. Em sat between Shadow's feet, brushing her. Lynn bustled back and forth from the fridge to the table with platters of food while Christmas music floated in from the living room. "What do you think it was this time, Dad?" Anna asked. "Honestly, honey, I have no idea." He stared straight ahead, his fingers rubbing his temple. "But she's eaten all kinds of things before, never got sick like this. She ate Mom's roses, your credit cards, Em's doll shoes. Remember when she ate the Legos? I know you don't want to leave her right now, but what do you say we take turns searching the house and her usual hiding places? If we find part of what she ate, it might help the vet." Em and Anna looked at each other as if they had an unspoken agreement. Between the two of them, they knew all of her hiding places, but they weren't about to leave Shadow's side. Lynn joined them on the floor. She had a tray with 4 cups of bright green liquid, a couple of notepads, and some markers. "I'll search. You guys write down all the hiding places." She handed Paul and Anna notepads and markers and turned to Em. "You just tell Grandma the best places to look, and I'll write them down." "I can do it," Em argued. "I'm big. I can make pictures." "You sure are. Green smoothie, anyone?" Lynn said, handing one to Paul. "Are you trying to kill me?" Paul asked, making a face. "What in God's name is in there?" he asked, not moving to take the cup. He touched Shadow's nose, hoping it would be moist again, but it was dry as sandpaper. "Funny you should mention God. It's all stuff he grew. Spinach, bananas, mangoes, and a pear," she said, taking a drink from one of the cups. So good. You just taste the fruit, really," she insisted. "It looks like pond scum," Paul said. "Yeah, pond scum," Em echoed. "It does look kind of disgusting, Grandma," Anna weighed in. "Just try a sip. I've been drinking a quarter of it, for the past month, and I feel like Superman. I haven't had any junk food in a while, and I don't even want it anymore." "Seriously?" "All right, I'm game. Pass the pond scum," Paul said. Em and Anna each took a cup from Lynn. Lynn smiled as she stroked Shadow's ear. "You do seem to have a lot of energy," Paul said, still eyeing the contents of the cup. "I feel like I'm 20. I couldn't think anymore. My mind was running in circles. I had to do something, control something. I organized the whole cabin and the storage shed, too. Last winter, it was a big accomplishment just to get out of bed each day and shower. I can't live like that anymore." "It's good. Tastes like bananas," Em announced and licked her lips. "Yeah, not bad," Anna agreed. "I've tasted worse. I think it's great that you've finally found some relief, Lynn." "Thanks, but it's more than relief. I feel like I'm getting younger. I've got to buy some new clothes before I go home. These are getting too baggy," she said, tugging at the waistband of her pants. Shadow whimpered, and everyone sat their cup down and moved closer to her, petting and consoling her. Paul looked at his phone. "I can't believe the vet hasn't called back yet. It's still Dr. Hammond, right, Ann?" No, Dad. That would be Mom's foot doctor." "Oh, geez. What's the name of the vet?" "Dr. Handler? Mom's got it in her phone. I think it's on the emergency number by the desk, but last time she just took her right to the animal hospital." "Can you find the number? Did you guys finish your list for Grandma?" he added, trying to stay calm. "Here," Anna said, handing hers to Lynn. "Don't forget to look under the deck. Last year we found all the steaks and seed packets from the neighbor's gardens under there." "Is this your bed?" Lynn asked, taking a drawing from Em's hand. "Yep, under my bed and in my closet. She ate my Barbie's legs off into closet," Em said, furrowing her brow. "Oh, dear," Lynn said, winking at Paul and taking the list from his hand. "Good luck," Paul said grimly. He heard the front door open and Colin and Frank stomp the snow off their shoes in the entryway. "Between the 3 of us, we'll find the smoking gun in no time," she said, and headed off to brief them. "I don't think She could eat a gun, Em said, sitting a little taller after she'd corrected herself. No, I don't think so either, Paul answered. He'd noticed Em correcting herself more lately. And while he knew it was a good thing, it made him a little sad to see her baby talk disappearing. But Claire had been right. Em was taking care of it on her own. Where are you, Claire? I need you. Claire had been sitting next to Paul from the moment they'd spread the blanket out on the floor. She'd always been Shadow's nurse. She was surprised to find herself more helpless than ever, except for picking up an occasional thought from Paul. She'd heard him say the words, "How could I mix up the doctors?" But his lips had never moved. She'd exercised some self-control, hadn't interfered, and now she was hearing an occasional thought. Interesting. Claire watched as Paul crossed his fingers. Anna crossed hers, and Em used her left hand to cross her fingers on her right hand. She listened for more thoughts and distinctly heard, "I love you," as Em lay down, pressed Shadow's coarse paw against her face, and closed her eyes. Colin watched Lynn and Frank disappear up the stairs with their lists. He hung his coat in the hall closet as he scanned Paul's list of Shadow's hiding places. Behind the couch, under the deck, and behind the camping equipment in the basement. He pulled a box of Fannie Mae chocolate-covered cherries from the wicker basket full of gifts Frank had brought in from the car. I should check on Paul and the girls, see if they need anything before I get started. Maybe grab one of Lynn's cookies. It wasn't the cookies he craved so much as the sense that everything would be all right, as if the law of nature stated that nothing bad could happen in the presence of freshly baked cookies. "Well, I'm not kissing any of you under the mistletoe this year," Colin said, trying to lighten the mood as he entered the kitchen, opening a box of chocolates and handing it to Paul. His face went slack at the sight of Shadow, her breathing shallow, her eyes closed. He took a seat on the floor next to Em, who immediately sat up and hugged him. Anna lifted her hand for a small wave, but she couldn't manage anything even close to a smile. "What's going on?" Colin asked. "I let Shadow out while the girls were decorating the tree. She didn't come home when I called her, but she does that sometimes. Then Em started saying Shadow was sick down by the creek. Don't ask me how she knew. But about a half hour later, Mrs. Gleason called and said her kids had found Shadow down by the bridge. I went and got her." "You called the vet?" "No, apparently I called a foot doctor," Paul said, rubbing his forehead. "It's Handler, not Hammond, but if I'd reached Dr. Handler right away, the weather's so bad. God, nothing's gone right. Thanks for the chocolates, by the way. Forgot to eat today," Paul said as he shoved a second one into his mouth and handed the box back to Colin. "Shadow ate something bad. Again," Em translated for Colin as she clung to his neck. "She'll be okay," Colin assured her as he petted Shadow's head, although he doubted it was true and instantly regretted saying it. He decided to keep his mouth shut for a while and offered the girls chocolates instead. "I don't like the one with guts," Em said. "No thanks," Anna said, making a face like he'd offered her a chocolate-covered cockroach. The buzzer on the stove rang, and Colin shouted, "I've got him, Lynn!" He stood up with them in his arms, set the chocolates on the counter, and walked over to the oven. "Your necklaces sure are getting long. Maybe it's time to start a third one," he whispered. Colin lifted one necklace and rubbed his thumb over a paperclip, shaking his head and giving Em a wink. She blinked both eyes in her attempt to wink back at him. He set Em down on the counter by the bananas and slipped on an oven mitt. When he'd set the cookies on the stovetop and turned the oven off, he looked at her. She had placed a banana sticker on each earlobe. "You going to help me look, or stay here?" he asked. "Stay with Shadow," she answered and reached for him. He helped her down off the counter, and she ran back to her spot at Shadow's feet. Colin broke off a piece of hot cookie, popped it in his mouth, and walked into the living room where Burl Ives was ordering everyone to have a holly jolly Christmas. Colin cracked his stiff neck and turned the volume down. "Don't boss me, Burl. I'm in no mood." He'd barely begun searching behind the couch when he heard Frank shout, "Got it! I found it!" He sped down the stairs with Lynn behind him. Frank held up the remains of an old red and white cardboard package with tinsel dangling from it. "Shit," Colin breathed. His eyes locked on Frank's for a second to convey his crystal-clear understanding before Frank proceeded to the kitchen. Lynn looked at Colin and mouthed, "What?" Colin just shook his head and motioned for her to follow Frank as he mustered his best poker face for the girls. Is there enough room to lay her down in your minivan? Frank asked. Where are we taking her? The animal hospital hasn't called back yet, Paul explained, getting to his feet and picking Em up in his arms. The tinsel, they can't digest it. It can get caught, Frank said. He threw the damp tinsel box into the garbage and bent down to grab the edges of the blanket. I've got her on this end, Paul. You get the other side. Our friend, Bob's beagle? Colin shut his mouth the second Frank glared at him. Paul hurriedly set Em down, picked up the corners of the blanket, and together he and Frank slowly lifted Shadow off the linoleum. Shadow's eyes opened a bit, and she made a feeble attempt to wag her tail, but no effort to move. Lynn, Colin, and the girls all huddled around the makeshift stretcher as they shuffled toward the garage. When they reached the back door, the room fell silent for a second as all eyes shifted to the girls, their faces pale, tears streaming down their cheeks. Anne, grab my coat. I think the keys are in the pocket. You go get your coat and have Grandma help you with your gloves. You two wait out front. I'll pull the van out. Go on now. Both of you. Hurry up, Paul said firmly. Our friend Jim is a vet, Frank whispered as the girls left the room. I just talked to him yesterday. His choir's performing tonight at the Art Institute. If I call him, I know he'll do everything he can. We can pick him up and head straight to his clinic. Lynn called over her shoulder. Now that's a plan. I'll pack everything up. We'll have Christmas Eve one way or another, wherever we are. She headed for the pantry where she found a wicker basket and began to pack it full of food from the table. In a matter of seconds, she'd grabbed another container of green smoothie from the fridge, a laundry basket from the desk, hooked her arm through her purse on the table, and headed past Santa into the living room to pack up the gifts. Colin held the door for Frank and Paul and ran into the garage to slide the van's door open. I'll be right back. I'm going to get their coats. As Colin shut the door to the garage behind him, anger and sadness rolled through his chest. This was too much for one family. He tried to breathe through it, finding their coats. He shut the closet door, but his knees weakened at the sight of the family photos hanging along the stairway. He imagined the stairway without all the photos of Claire and Shadow, and he fell backward and slid down the door. Tears fell onto his dress shirt, creating dark blue spots. I can't fix any of this. He tried to stand up and pull himself together. He knew he had to, but he couldn't. Colin sat on the floor, coats piled on his lap, pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes. He thought he was seeing spots when he pulled his hands away. His vision was a little blurred, but he was sure he'd seen a flash of red. As he looked around for the source, a swath of emerald green fabric beneath Frank's coat caught his eye. He grabbed someone's scarf along with the coats. Pinned to the scarf was a little plastic snowman. Colin folded the scarf with the snowman on top and set it next to him. They're waiting. Get up. He suddenly wondered if Claire had managed to communicate something to Em about Shadow. Em had known where Shadow was. Amidst the commotion, no one had asked her how she knew. The tears returned in full force. If you can do that, Claire, why are you letting this happen? The overhead light flickered and burned out. Colin held his breath. The sound of his own heartbeat grew loud in his ears. He saw the faint red glow again and looked down. The snowman's eyes were lit up. They went dark. Grabbing the scarf, Colin scrambled to his feet and shouted at the ceiling, "Do it again!" He stood in the dark, panting, wanting to push all doubt from his mind, be grateful, be satisfied. But he needed more. I have to know it's you. Show me it's you, Claire, he whispered into the dark. One more, Claire. I know you can do it. Give me 3 different signs and I'll know for sure, and I promise I won't ask for anything else ever again. I swear, I'm ready. Come on, he said, holding the snowman up to his face. He didn't dare move. I found the magic spot. Colin's chest heaved in anticipation. He could hear honking and Frank shouting his name, but he knew nothing short of an earthquake could tear him away, not even the wrath of Frank. He waited. He could hear the ticking of the stove cooling down, the faint tinkling of a wind chime outside the kitchen window, a slow, steady drip in the stainless steel sink. But nothing definitively Claire. He dropped his hands to his sides in defeat. He was eyeing the van out on the street, through the long window pane next to the front door, when his phone rang. It should have been Frank screaming his head off, But it wasn't. With his scarf still clenched in his fist, Colin bent down and feverishly searched through the coats on the floor until he found his phone. He inhaled so sharp, he choked. The screen read Claire. He pressed send, his heart about to burst, but the call wouldn't go through. He tried 4 more times, but it was no use. It was no longer in service. Paul had told him he'd canceled her service several weeks after the police had bagged it for evidence. So it had to be sitting in a box at the police station with a dead battery. That was 3. Fair enough. You did it. Are you here? Are you here now? He asked, his voice quavering in the dark. He held the snowman up to his face once more. Once for yes, twice for no. The front door flew open, slamming against the stopper on the wall. What the hell are you doing in here? Frank demanded, bending down to gather up the coats. Colin stuttered. Should we go without you? That dog is in real trouble. And you know it? Let's go. Frank grabbed the doorknob with the coats draped over his arm and stepped out the door. I don't think she's going to die, Colin said as he tried the light switch, flipping it up and down several times, smiling to himself. Bob Spiegel died from this very same thing, and in case you haven't noticed, this family seems to have the worst luck in the world, Frank replied. Claire won't let it happen. She's here. Knock it off. Get in the van. No, she showed me. She made contact. I mean, unmistakable contact, Colin insisted, still flipping the switch. For Christ's sake, Colin, Frank said, swatting Colin's hand away from the switch. You cannot carry on like this in front of the girls. I won't allow it. They're too vulnerable. He grabbed Colin's arm, pulled him out the door, and slammed it behind them. He handed Colin his coat, put on his own. Then he checked to make sure the door was locked and yanked Colin down the icy steps as he clung to the railing. She was here. Look, she called me on my cell. She burned out that light and lit up this pin, Colin cried, still carrying the scarf and trying to shove the snowman and the phone in Frank's face. Frank sighed, stopped on the sidewalk, and grabbed Colin by the shoulders, freezing rain pelting their faces. All right. We'll talk about this later. I believe you, but later. Got it? He said, pulling Colin by the hand. Okay, believe me, or shut up and get in the van, believe me. I believe you. Now shut up and get in the van. Claire looked around the animal hospital. This isn't so bad. Framed posters of puppies and kittens adorned the sunny yellow walls. 2 large bulletin boards overflowing with letters of gratitude hung on either side of the double doors. Pinned to them were dozens of colorful little thank you notes and photographs of happy pets and their owners. The boards exuded warm, undeniable reassurance. Claire made note of a small bare spot in the lower right-hand corner where their thank you note for saving Shadow would fit perfectly. They should use that cute one of have Shadow playing in the leaves with the girls. Instead of the standard plastic waiting room chairs, there were big, blue, comfy couches spotted with a few well-scrubbed and deodorized stains. Several brightly colored beanbag chairs were nestled in a corner. An aquarium full of goldfish was situated next to a child-sized red table and matching chairs. Coloring books and crayons were scattered across the table. Crayons, Shadow's favorite. Claire loved the big Christmas tree in the corner with its twinkling white lights and Snoopy decorations. If they couldn't spend Christmas Eve at home, this was the next best thing. In fact, maybe it was better. The important thing was that they were all together. Janet, a female intern, was spending her Christmas Eve taking dogs with casts and plastic funnels around their necks outside. Dr. Roger Ellis, part owner in the small animal hospital with Jim, was also spending his holiday at the office. The 2 of them had been eating pizza, watching It's Wonderful Life, starring Jimmy Stewart, on a television behind the desk when they received the call from Jim to prep for a canine intestinal surgery. Janet distracted the girls with a grand tour. Colin and Lynn settled into one of the cushy couches while the rest of the adults proceeded to the x-ray room. Green smoothie? Lynn asked, holding out a Rubbermaid container full of thick, bright green liquid. Colin shuddered. Linda Blair called. She wants that back. I promise it's good for you. Be serious, Lynn. Hand me a snickerdoodle before someone gets hurt. Colin held out his hand and waited. Lynn handed him the basket. Girls, are you hungry? She called over her shoulder. Janet held Em on her hip. letting her feed the fish while Anna read thank you notes on one of the bulletin boards. "You and I really need to talk," Lynn said, patting Colin's knee. "I'll be back in a minute." "Take your time. I have a feeling we're going to be here a while," Colin said, brushing crumbs from his lap. Lynn walked over to the bulletin boards and put her arm around Anna. "She'll be okay. You and I know that for sure," she whispered. "Do you think they go there too? I mean, are you sure?" "They have souls, don't they?" Lynn reasoned. "Yeah, they've got to. I wouldn't expect her to move things around like your mother, but there must be a doggy equivalent, something distinctly shadow. She'll surprise you someday. But I think she's going to pull through. She always does. I've been hanging out with Detective Robles." "I thought you hated her." "I did," Anna confessed, staring into the snowy, frozen parking lot. "But then she came to see me at school. She had a message for me from a psychic or a medium or whatever you call them." "Really?" "It had to be Mom," Anna insisted. "What was the message?" Lynn asked, captivated. "She said she got the balloon I let go in the backyard the night of my birthday. She knew the color and everything, and she answered yes to the note I'd tied to it, asking her if she'd celebrated with us. She even knew about the shoes Frank and Colin gave me, and the thank you note that I'd sent them. I hadn't told anyone about the balloon. Dad and Em were asleep when I snuck outside." "That's incredible, Anne." "I knew she'd come through. We just have to keep our eyes peeled. Don't you think everybody else would be doing better if they knew the things we know?" Lynn shook her head. "I'd be careful about that. Most people aren't ready to believe the things you and I have seen. And I don't want anyone convincing you that you've imagined it. You know better." "Psst," Frank whispered from the hallway next to the intake desk, motioning to Colin. Colin gave Lynn a quick glance of unease and crossed the room. "Looks like there might be news," Lynn said, rubbing her hand over Anna's back. "I'd better see what's going on." "Grandma?" "Yeah, hon. Thank you for being, the way you are. Thank you for believing. And for, believing me. Thank you for keeping an open mind. Don't ever lose that, Anna."